Hi, Jordi. Hi, Pete. Yeah, good morning everyone, or good afternoon wherever you are today. As I said, it's really a fantastic event for the third time in a row in Barcelona, Jordi. We're very pleased to be with you today. We just, as you can see on the screen also here, we have our colleagues from Antwerp, Patrick Verhoeven, and also Veronica from London. Before we start to talk on energy transition, let me share with you a conversation that we had yesterday with Santiago Garcia Milla and also some venture capital funds here in Barcelona. And the VCs, the venture firms, were looking at port technology, maritime trade technology, logistics technology, where they could invest, because after COP26, something is happening. And in our industry, they understand from the financial perspective that maritime trade is about 90+% of the movement of cargo. And when we look at numbers, we were sharing data yesterday with them. When we look at numbers in Europe, the top 10 European ports are doing about 150,000 port calls. And for those port calls, we have about 40 million of trucks today in Europe. So we need to, like Steve Jobs was saying, we need to think different now on in the context of post-COP26. And we need to look at what can we do on energy transition. And the VCs are really very interested to look at startups and the industry to see what they can do and invest in new companies. So that it's a new thing really in our industry, in Europe at least. And today, to discuss about this, we're going to go on energy transition. And we all know that energy transition, we still have lots of questions. So we're going to start by Veronica. Veronica, good to have you here today out of London. In terms of policy making and policy and strategy, Veronica, we're still in a chicken and egg situation, right? At least from a UK side. Can we discuss about that, Veronica?
I think, as you mentioned, for the COP26 just finished, and with UK being one of the nations that signed the Declaration on Zero Emission Shipping by 2050 initiative, I think it sent a clear signals to both the public and private sector that greener shipping is necessary and it's doable. So hopefully with the initiative, it can accelerate the development of policy and international standards for different types of zero emission fields, and then drive the development of technologies and supporting infrastructures, and ultimately reach the goal of adoption and reach net zero.
Okay, thank you, Veronica. Pete. Very important thing happened this year in Belgium. The merger of Port of Antwerp and the Port of Zeebrugge. I understand that is going to be a huge accelerator for energy transition, especially in green hydrogen and also in LNG. What's going on? Can you tell us?
Yeah, first an observation. It's quite surprising to see that in that small region, in 5 years' time, you see a complete change of the landscape, of the port landscape. Ports which have been there for more than 500 years. Bruges, Ghent, Antwerp, they are merging. Ghent has merged 5-6 years ago with the port of Terneuzen in the Netherlands, and Antwerp is now merging with Zeebrugge. So, but why are we doing that? I think there are a few elements. First of all, Port of Antwerp is a massive, big chemical cluster. You have their second largest cluster in the world after Houston. So there we need a lot of, and today still carbon-based feedstock to produce these chemical products. But they need also a lot of energy. Today it's mainly based on gas to create steam. And a lot of these chemical processes, steam is used, which is a very energy-intensive process. A second element is that Antwerp is the 5th largest bunkering port in the world. So there it's about 6 million ton a year where other ships are coming in and bunker and sail around the world. So also there we have to go to low carbon, different fuels. And the third element, and that's the point why we merged with Zeebrugge. Already in Zeebrugge today, 15% of the European LNG is coming in there. right? Gas from Norway and Algeria and other regions. So that infrastructure is present. And by building a new global green hydrogen supply chain, where in other regions in the world, like Chile, Egypt, Oman, where optimal situations are present to create green hydrogen in a sustainable way based on solar panels and wind energy, you have to transport that in one or the other form to Europe, because Europe will not be able to produce enough green hydrogen itself. About 50% will have to be imported. So we position ourselves there together with Zeebrugge as being a main hub. And why? Because you can use the existing pipeline infrastructure to transport also hydrogen. If it's green or not, make not big difference. But by small modifications, you will be able, and there is a plan to build that even up to 7,000 kilometers of pipelines in Europe, and at least have that transportation issue on green hydrogen solved.
Thank you, Pete. Lots of things is happening in ports right now in 2021. In Barcelona, Jordi, along with your team, you launched in April of this year the new master plan, strategic plan for Port of Barcelona. And in this master plan, you have primarily 3 strategic objectives. And I think it's very interesting to share it, to bring that into the global context. One is the human capital, the sustainability of the human capital and the people, not only for the port, but also for the city of Barcelona. A second strategic objective is the economic sustainability that for the development of the economy of Barcelona and the ecosystems. But in our context of our discussion today, the third strategic objective, it's about environmental sustainability. I think it would be interesting if you can share, what type of actions that you are looking at in environmental sustainability in the context of energy transition in Barcelona. Jordi.
Okay, thank you, Pascal, for the introduction. I'm glad you mentioned the 3 objectives at the beginning, because it's important to understand that we are, as Barcelona, we are a medium-sized port in terms of cargo. No? We compare myself with our colleagues from Antwerp. What makes us quite unique, I would say, in the region and also in Europe is that we are an extremely diversified port. Okay. So we host all different types of activities, terminals, for passengers, for cargo, a logistics activity zone, an area for marinas, for private yachts, 2 5-star hotels in the port area, etc., etc. So our environmental objectives have to be very diverse, okay, in order to try to promote energy transition in all of those sectors. No? So we don't have lots of time in order to go into detail on each one of them, but let me mention the 3-4 main pillars of our strategy when it comes to energy transition in the coming 5 years, which is the period that covers our new strategic plan approved this year. No? One, electrification. I think you mentioned it at the beginning. Electrification has different perspectives. Probably the most known or most attractive project is the deployment of onshore power supply in terminals. Okay, today we have already one of our marinas for private yachts already with OPS for those big mega yachts that come to the port for entertaining, for maintaining, etc. But in the coming 2-3 years, if everything goes as planned, we're going to have also one of our container terminals with an OPS deployed and one of our ferry terminals. Okay, so this OPS within electrification. But within electrification, we have other projects as well. Automation of processes. No? We have already one of the 2 container terminals semi-automated. Electrification, automation of gates, things like that. No? So electrification is one of the first, let's say, objectives. Then we have another one that is connected to the first one as well, which is development of intermodality. Okay, we have been, I would say, and trying to be objective, quite successful in transferring some traffic from roads, those 40 million trucks that you mentioned, and transferring some trucks or hundreds of thousands of trucks from road into trains. So here we have also new projects in mind for the coming years in order to go deeper into that direction. Circular economy. Is very important as well, no? In the port, being able to reuse, reutilize, etc., the waste being generated in the port activity from cargo vessels, from cruise ships, from other activities as well. And I will leave it here, not to extend myself too much. And probably the fourth pillar would be renewable energy generation in the port with solar panels, other installations that we have in mind for the coming years.
Yeah, but that's clear enough, and long project, lots of things to be done. Patrick, we would have liked to have you here indeed, good friend of us in Barcelona here. Very often when we discuss, Patrick, we discuss about the divide in our world. It's in the case of digital transformation, we have a digital divide. It is the same also in energy transition divide. How can we address this bottleneck maybe at the IMO level?
Thank you, Pascal, and good afternoon, colleagues. Indeed, it's a pity that I can't join you in Barcelona. I think your question, Pascal, is a very pertinent one, and I think it's at the heart of the debate in the IMO, where we're actually confronting two principles of international law. And forgive me to become a little bit legalistic here, but when we talk about climate policy, there is a well-accepted principle of common but differentiated responsibilities. That means that every country in the world has to contribute to climate goals, but according to their own possibilities and also the historical pollution and emissions that have taken place, which gives actually a good position to the developing world. Unfortunately, the IMO has another principle which says that there should be no more favorable treatment. That means that every flag state in IMO needs to be treated in the same way. So that is clearly opposite to the principle that we have in climate law. And that is at the heart of the discussion between developed and developing countries in IMO. We have the developed countries saying we need to accelerate, we need to increase the targets, we need to move faster. And then you have the developing economies to say, okay, yes, but maybe we need to take into account our different starting positions. And we don't want to be impacted negatively from an economic point of view. One potential solution, and that is one that we have proposed as IAPH to the upcoming MEPC meeting, which will be held in the coming weeks in London, is that maybe funding can be part of the solution. And one of the big discussions now in IMO is whether there should be a market-based measure, like for instance a carbon tax, that will decrease the gap between the fuels of the future and the current fuels. And maybe that revenue could also be used to improve infrastructure, including bunkering infrastructure, in ports in developing and emerging economies. And that could maybe be part of the answer. I'm not saying it's the entire answer, but it could definitely be part of the answer of deblocking the discussion between the developed and the emerging economies, and therefore close the gap in a way, also in this sense. So that's a submission that we've made as IAPH, and let's see how that discussion will now continue over the next months and probably also into next year.
So Patrick, you just mentioned about the importance of tax on the global scale. But Veronica, when it go to Port of London, one of your complex tasks, if not one of the most important complex tasks, is a business plan in terms of capex. Where do you need to put, where do you need to invest dollars? What type of fuels? Solutions are very different. What is the situation in London right now on this matter?
So I think business plan is definitely a complex task, and it's a very important part of the decarbonisation. It is crucial to have stakeholders to buy in and invest in it, but at the same time, we have to make them realise decarbonisation is not only a challenge, but is also recognise its opportunities it can provide as well. So such as like new business cases for port, such as they can have a central role to play in the low carbon future, freight transport to the heart of the city, energy provision, etc. And the PRA has been in discussion with our stakeholders as part of the 10 Vision Refreshed, which is a river development framework set out to 2050. So through that work, it's highlighted future changes in terms of the growth of the port, the environment around us with the climate change, the change in the cargo types, because the majority of our current cargoes are fossil fuel based. So stakeholders will have to prepare for that change and look into new business opportunities for them, and also operations for the operators. How the future changes might have an impact on the operation, but also the opportunities.
Yeah, for sure, Veronica, business models, it's always interesting to look at business model here. And we're in Barcelona. I think one of the most important person who is talking to me always about business model, a new business model in our port industry, Santiago Mila, here in Barcelona. Every time we meet, is that what's next? So in London, it's about what next. But business model is one thing. The other thing is to build a business plan, indeed. So we have set the landscape, of energy transition from a global level with Patrick and in Antwerp and in London and in Barcelona. Pete, you are saying in Belgium lots of things are changing, but especially in the port area. But in the petrochemical complex that you have in Antwerp, the top 5 contributors of Belgium are in greenhouse gas emission are in Antwerp. How do you work with those players to address the change here?
It's indeed a fact that about 15% of the carbon dioxide emissions in Belgium are happening in the port of Antwerp. We are a big port in a smaller country, but that's a big challenge, of course, but it gives also an opportunity, because we would like to look for solutions there and not wait until we have non-carbon feedstocks or other forms of energy available. So a fast way to reduce emissions is just to capture them. So we have a plan on the table, and it's an execution by 2030 out of these 18 million ton of carbon dioxide emissions to capture 50%, 9 million ton. So that's an unlimited set of locations where we put technology and infrastructure to capture that, liquefy it in the port, transport it by pipeline or by ship to empty gas fields in the North Sea. So in that way, or even you can use it for other processes. Carbon dioxide is in a lot of chemical process also a basic component. So by storing that, you can move fast and capture millions of tons of carbon dioxide. In the meantime, of course, the chemical industry will have to make that transition to a non-carbon feedstock. But you cannot expect that will happen in 5-6 years' time. We don't have time to wait another 10-15 years. So as an intermediate solution, and it's a big investment, and indeed the business plan there is challenging, but okay, I think we believe it's feasible. But we cannot wait, so we have to start doing it now as an intermediate solution.
Yeah, I think we have been seeing a few countries working on this aspect here, but you have a very ambitious project here, indeed, in the meantime to manage the transition time. Jordi, you started to talk about intermodality. Here in Barcelona, you have been addressed intermodality big time, especially in rail, right?
Yeah, correct. I think one of our biggest contributions as a port community to reduction of CO2 emissions and other external effects of traffic has been transferring hundreds of thousands of trucks from the roads to rail in recent years. We have done obviously this hand in hand with very big shippers that surprisingly, nobody thought 10 years ago that would be very heavy train users, very big retailers, very big companies from the fashion and footwear industry, that are probably today, together with the automotive industry, which is also very important when it comes to rail and intermodality with ports in Spain and in Barcelona in particular. So we had been quite successful, I would say, in recent years. Together with them, we have reached 15% for containers, more than 30% of modal shift for cars entering or leaving the port. Now, for the coming years, we have, I would say, basically 2 or 3 objectives in order to proceed further in this direction. One is international traffic, and here, unfortunately, we haven't been so successful, or very little success. We have had very little success in being able to attract traffic from roads into train, both from the port, but from also the region around Barcelona and Spain in general. We have every day 15,000 trucks that cross the border between Spain and France, and very few trains on the contrary. So here, this is one of the objectives, and here there's issues related to infrastructure, to operations, to liberalization of the rail industry. Then the second, I would say, is very short radius rail. Okay, here still, fortunately, Barcelona and Catalonia and the northeast of Spain is still one of the biggest industrial areas in Southern Europe, and we haven't managed to transfer to rail traffic going to 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 kilometers locations around the port. So here, this would be, and obviously all the road network around the city suffers from this traffic that goes to this inland location. So this together, the port community, the port authority, the regional authorities, etc., we have to make a big effort in the coming years to have because here also we need some infrastructure still, when it comes to inland rail terminals and other things in order to be able to transfer part of this traffic from road to rail. So international is one major objective, short distance is the second objective, and then we could come also into solid bulks, liquid bulks that we haven't been so successful in the past in being able to develop intermodality train port.
Is there, for example, a business case for Hyperloop that we just discussed?
For Hyperloop,
yeah,
we have no really. We haven't studied it.
Not yet.
We have seen it. We are looking with interest into it, but we haven't studied really as a business case really deeply, I would say.
Yeah, that's going back to what we were saying, Veronica, the business plan is so complex, so many options. But before we talk about option, Patrick, from an IPH perspective, what would be your recommendation? We have 100, if not 1,000 of participants from all over the world and ports. What should be the key action, Patrick, that port authorities and stakeholders could take on the energy transition?
Yeah, I think the answer is depends what sort of port you are, of course, and generally there are three levels, I think, where a port authority can interact, and the impact will be different. The highest influence, but the lowest impact is on your own activities as a port authority, and that depends then whether you're an operating port or a landlord port. Second are the activities where you as a port authority have contractual relations, shipping companies, terminal operators. And then the third, potentially highest impact, but also the most difficult to influence is, all those activities where you don't have a contractual relation or a commercial relation as a port authority. So that's setting the landscape a little bit. More specific on shipping, I think that's something where every port authority can do something, because every port in theory should have ships. And there are four actions. And again, it's you can distinguish the difficulty and the impact. The highest impact, of course, is to prepare for the future fuels, whatever they will be, provide bunkering infrastructure, making sure that safety procedures are in place and everything, and that you as a port authority take a very proactive role in that. Of course, that is difficult because there's still a lot of uncertainty out there. What are going to be those fuels? What sort of quality requirements will there be? How is that supply chain going to work? What will be the demand? But clearly, that is the most important and also the most significant investment. And then there are three others. I think Jordi mentioned it already. It's providing onshore power. For when ships are on shore, are at berth in the port. Again, not to be underestimated in terms of the investment that is related to that, and also partly a discussion of whether demand will be there, tricky one. And then you have two, which are the more low-hanging fruits, easier to apply, but maybe the impact isn't as high as the others. One is to provide incentives to ships that are performing better than what international regulations require. And we have developed for that in IPH an index, the Environmental Ship Index, which has been around for 10 years. And that allows port authorities to make that evaluation and, if they want to, give commercial incentives like reduction in port use or other things. And then a final one, which is an interesting one because it brings together actually digitalization and data collaboration and decarbonization, that's the optimization of port calls. That by better exchange of data between all the parties in the nautical chain, ships don't have to wait before they come to their berth. They can get in and out as fast as possible and therefore produce as little emissions as possible. These are for shipping, and as I said, these are areas that every port will be confronted with. The four main areas, also as recognized by the IMO in a specific resolution that was adopted in 2019.
Thank you, Patrick. Before going on the next round of discussion, we just got a few questions here that related to what you were saying, Patrick, and Pete as well, and I'd like you to take that. What about storage? What about storage about these new fuels? And what also is going to be the impact versus the traditional industry with a fossil fuel? How do we see that? But I think the first question is about what about the storage of the hydrogen and others? How do you see that in Antwerp, for example, Pete?
I think if you look to shipping, there is, of course, in the larger ships, it should be feasible to store hydrogen. You need a lot of space for that. But I think probably what will happen is that it will be bounded, green hydrogen molecule will be bounded to another one, and in that way you will create ammonia or methanol, and in that way you will be able to create more energy intensive storage and place that on ships. That will take some time, but the expectation is that by 2030 the procedures and the operation will be present to do that. I think on land, that's probably less of an issue. Already today, a lot of hydrogen storage is present, but also there you can bound it to other molecules. But I think there the flexibility, of course, is much larger.
Thank you, Pete. So, setting the landscape, we've been talking about the different options. We have been starting to talk about business planning, especially from a financial perspective. But we have, Veronica, other subject matters. You have key challenges in London with the Thames River and the ecosystem on the physical side. Can we discuss about the challenge that you face in London today on the energy transition options?
Yes, so I think in terms of the key challenges will be accommodating and facilitating the transition from carbon heavy to low carbon to zero carbon fuel. In London, we do have various type of vessels coming in or operating within our port, and it's very likely that they will require different type of technological solutions to get to low and zero emissions. And those technology solutions will be mature at a slightly different time scales, depends on the vessel type. So the main challenge we like as a port authority is to support the transition in a safe manner for all the vessel type and during the transition, especially consider London as a very busy city with a dense populations. So finding storage space, bunkering options, etc., be a challenge.
Yeah, thank you, Veronica. Pete, one question from the audience live here is about risk management from the financial perspective. You are looking at green hydrogen massively, as you were explaining. How do you balance the risk of investment on green hydrogen when we don't know the future?
Green hydrogen will of course not be the main form of energy, but I think for shipping and like for the chemical industry as feedstock and as form of energy, I think all studies, and we have been doing a lot of that, it's time for action now, or predicting that it's feasible, so that we should go in that direction. Of course, the price is still high, and the projections are challenging to have affordable production of green hydrogen. But I think the energy sector in itself is quite traditional, and a lot of innovation is happening today. So everywhere in the world I see today new initiatives coming, new startups, new companies changing their production process, testing new things. We don't have much time anymore, but I expect that in the coming 3 to 5 years some new solutions will come up to make the overall production process, like electrolyzers, The efficiency of that is improving a lot, and it's necessary to make it an affordable business case, but I'm quite confident that we will get there.
And that brings me to a point that in Antwerp, like also in Barcelona, you are focusing on human capital. And recently you created a new district, the next-gen districts, to attract companies and talent to Antwerp, right?
Yes. Yeah, next-gen district, and I think in that major transformation we have to go through, we will have to change our production processes and create new production processes and close the loop in materials, for instance. So what we did as a port authority is developed about 80 hectares of ground, and the first phase is now being developed, where companies working on circular economy and sustainable forms of energy can have a location. And today we passed the first round. 4 or 5 companies have signed up. It's on recycling old tires. And building new materials out of that. It's about batteries. It's about biochemicals. Recycling polyethylene, for instance. So these kind of new companies, existing one, but creating new production processes, or will find a place there. And very interesting, a small part of that is 2 hectares, is also next-gen demo, where we will give space to small startups to build demonstrators, because we see startups coming, having all kind of decarbonization technologies, which are today on labo phase, but they need to be able to test it in a wider environment and scale it up in that major cluster which is present there. So we would provide space on that. And by the way, the call has been opened a couple of weeks ago for next-gen demo, so if you're interested, always welcome.
Yeah, we're sure that you have an initiative here. In Barcelona, there is another initiative also related to energy transition and environmental sustainability, which is the blue tech, blue economy tech district as well. Tell us what's going on there. It's part of your master plan too.
Yes, correct. It's something similar to Antwerp, but before I go into it, let me just mention something. No? We are, as a port, fortunately today, we not in the past, no, when we thought about the port we were or we wanted to be, no, we have very little industry in our port, okay, apart from very minor activities on soya beans, we don't have almost industrial activity here, no. So our impact, no, in terms of CO2 emissions and other emissions is very small compared to other ports, no. So when we speak about blue economy, no, our main first focus is to finish what's in our hands, no, and under our responsibilities when it comes to decarbonizing the port activity, no, OPS, what we mentioned before. So this is, when we speak about blue economy, first is what we are doing to become green, to mix blue and green, no? This is the first thing. Second, also, we are working on different, on a blue economy district in the port where we want to accommodate different startups, innovation hubs that are already some working in Barcelona, some working in Spain, some in Southern Europe, no, and others working on taking advantage and using marine resources from a sustainable point of view, etc. And we'll have a specific area, smaller than in Antwerp probably, because we are smaller in general. But we want to benefit also. Barcelona is one of the 4 or 5 capitals in Europe when it comes to startups and innovation attraction, apart from the big capitals, let's say, Berlin, London, Paris, no? So after normally in all the international rankings comes Barcelona. And we have already an ecosystem, very important, of startups of different sectors working for the logistics sector, working for the mobility, e-mobility, very important in Barcelona, e-mobility for both cargo, last mile, trains, vessels, and passengers. So we want to benefit from this ecosystem in order to develop something more oriented towards the sea. Okay, which is still, it's less developed in Barcelona. So we are going to create specific places with incentives in order to be able to develop this ecosystem working with sea resources and the blue economy in general.
Yeah, and as we were discussing earlier today on this panel, I mean, it's startups is one thing, technology is another thing, but finance and investment and venture capital is critical. So the discussion that we had yesterday here in Barcelona with venture firm is also very interesting. What can we do? Where can we invest? Working together is going to be a subject matter of tomorrow collaboration. Patrick, in terms of energy transition, what about good practices, if not best practices today around on the world? Do we have some business cases? We have, beyond this question also, we have one question from the audience, which is what about small ports or emerging ports working together on circular economy related to energy transition? So that's a second take for you, Patrick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there are quite a few good practices out there, because I think a lot of ports actually came into this discussion on decarbonization from another angle, and that is air quality. I think a lot of ports were early on, and I'm talking more than 10 years ago, even longer, already forced by either by local regulation or regional regulation to start investing in some of the issues that I mentioned before, like neutral power, incentives, port call optimization, and also bunkering, for instance, for LNG, which we know is a transitional fuel when it comes to decarbonization. But there is a lot of experience already in that field, which can be used and transferred also when we talk about deploying the fuels of the future for shipping, that is. I think the main issue, and where we need to develop, I think, more experience is in upscaling. And you mentioned collaboration. I think that is indeed essential. And I was very inspired by hearing last week during COP26, there were actually two messages that came out where ports play a role, and that is really the creation of green corridors, because you need to make a difference on certain, the major trade lanes where shipping occurs and where you can actually have the biggest gains in reducing the emissions. You need to start looking at that concept where you can indeed, between two major hubs, which are ideally also main bunkering hubs, you can start bringing stakeholders together in a sort of cross-value chain collaboration. Make sure that these fuels are available, that you also have, of course, the demand from your customers, and adequate regulation. And one example that was mentioned, and it's good that we have Pete here in the panel, because maybe he can also say a bit more about it. One test case that is going to start is between Montreal and Antwerp. They announced that they're going to develop a North Atlantic green shipping corridor. Of course, both ports, as we already heard from Pete regarding Antwerp, but the same goes for Montreal. They also have energy clusters, so in that sense, there is that possibility for synergies. Also from a business case perspective. And I think that's where the second point that you mentioned comes in. Indeed, you need to have that possibility for the collaboration and also commercial collaboration between stakeholders within your port community to make that happen. But clearly these green shipping corridors, and there was another report that came out last week during COP of the Global Maritime Forum that actually has been doing also some not real test cases yet, but that has been looking at some feasibility studies for the Australia-Japan route in iron ore, also for a carrier route between Northeast Asia and the US, and a deep sea route between a container route between Far East and Europe. So clearly that's where we're gonna have to look for the future if we talk about scale and really be able to meet these decarbonization targets, which will now be even accelerated for the future.
So Patrick, you bring again the dimension of collaboration. We have been talking about what we do at ports, how we do it at ports in energy transition. But let's discuss for the final round here all together about the coalition of willing. It's going to be a major theme for the next session of today and tomorrow. How can we work together? Patrick, what about the shipping line, for example? Maersk recently announced its question from the audience that we just got live about Maersk is going to methanol. How ports are working with Maersk, if any other shipping line on methanol? How do you see altogether the coalition of willing, not only working alone, but working like Antwerp is doing with Montreal in a corridor, which is very interesting. So Patrick, do you want to take this one on relating to about Maersk's methanol ports and working with Maersk and other shipping line on those matters? How can we collaborate on this matter?
Yeah, I think that builds on very nicely what I said about corridors. Indeed, you need to look at your own situation, your commercial situation, and your customers. And the future, in terms of shipping fuel, is going to be multi-fuel, probably. At least that's what I hear. Everybody's saying. So it will be difficult to say it's going to be a single fuel solution, and that would be even risky to do that. So you need to really look at your own commercial portfolio, your shipping lines and customers, to see what would be the best for your port. And a concept like a shipping corridor could work very well in that respect. Coalitions of the willing, I think there are plenty of coalitions of the willing out there already. One good example is this latest call to action from Global Maritime Forum, again, to accelerate decarbonization of shipping. There were 160 companies that signed up to it, of which 20 were port authorities, and that makes them the second largest category behind ship owners to be signatories of this declaration. So clearly those ports, and I believe all the ports that are participating in this Smart Port Conference are part of that, they form de facto a certain coalition of the willing. But what I think what is missing is a good overall framework. Where do we bring that leadership, and how can we activate that leadership? And I would draw a parallel with what we're doing on digitalization, Pascal, as you very well know. What we do in IPH, and you're the chairman of our data collaboration committee, we have chain ports, which is a very important network of leadership ports when it comes to digitalization. Our role is more focused on policy. Our role is also focused on bridging the gap between the developed ports and the developing countries. I think we need a similar framework for decarbonization, where a trade association like ours can play its role, but also clear a lead group of ports that are, like the 20 ports that signed up to this declaration, which also shared all their best practices, by the way, which you can consult online, what they've done on decarbonization. That needs to become operational so that we can, share the results of test projects, whether that's shipping corridors or others, share that, learn from that, and then extend them to a more global scale. I think that's the sort of coalitions of the willing that we need to get together and get it organized at a global level. Also the interaction with the regulators like IMO and some of the regional regulators. I think that's the way forward, and I think that's something we can do as an industry and drive that as a port industry.
Yeah, thank you, Patrick. You have a very clear message about the coalition of willing. I know that one of the next sessions is going to be about energy community systems. How do you see coalition of willing from your side, Jordi?
Well, I think Patrick just mentioned some examples of very good coalitions of willings that are already happening. He mentioned projects coming from the AAPH. We have also the World Port Climate Action Plan, where different ports all over the world we work together. We have the World Port Sustainability Program. Within it, we have the Clean Marine Fuels Working Group. So I think we have in the Mediterranean, we are working in the Medaports Association, in Medports Association also, in sharing experiences when it comes to energy transition. But obviously here, the main actor here is the shipping lines, and we also work with them individually, and we have to work together with at least the ports in the same region, in going forward with similar solutions or equivalent solutions or compatible solutions that make things easier for all of us. Here at the port today we receive calls with liquefied natural gas in Barcelona, with fuel oil, with batteries. We have already some yachts that connect to OPS. So it's important to work with the different segments, all the ports in the same area at least together, share experiences, in order to avoid the misuse, or that as it had happened in different sectors in the past, when it comes to digitalization, when it started also with digitalization, everybody advanced on different directions, and at the end we lose time and money in this process, let's say.
So Pete, beyond what you do in Antwerp, coalition of willings, and beyond Montreal, do you have any other plans on this?
Yeah, I think maybe first the point I would like to make is we should not create new fora, because we have enough fora. It's time for action. It's time for action. And I hope every port authority should take up two roles: is bringing in their ecosystem the necessary stakeholders together, have the community building function in bringing the right parties together to things get moving. And the second role is to be a pioneer. Every port authority should play a role as being a pioneer. Is it now in South Africa or in Norway or in China? But every Port Authority should take that role, because it's the only way to move fast forward. And things are happening, and action is happening. And indeed, Montreal is a nice example, because it's maybe a global problem, but we need local solutions. And we should not forget that. The solutions needs to be built locally. We will not have a global solution, never.
Thank you, Pete. The last word, we are running out of time, will be for Veronica. Coalition of Willing in London. Few words, Veronica, floor is yours.
I think building on every other speakers in the room, I do agree it's time for actions, but communication, we should keep that going on, not just across port, but also across different sectors, especially sectors that have sort of a head start compared to the maritime sector. There's a lot of things that we can learn from each other.
I think a fantastic journey altogether today to talk about energy transition. We're going to go back tomorrow in another session on intermodality, where energy transition is going to be and electrification going to be also. Thanks for being with us, Veronica, Patrick, Jordi, and Pete. It's always a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you.
Thank you.